Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Smile CDR 2024.08.R01 and HAPI FHIR 7.4.0 release webinar. This release is codenamed Copernicus. We'll talk a little bit about that momentarily. Good morning to everyone who's watching this live. If you're watching this at least from North America, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching this from the world, or if you're watching this on a recording. Who knows? Thanks for watching. Anyway, let's dive in. As always, we are going to be talking today about what is going on in the world of HAPI FHIR, what's going on in the world of Smile CDR, what's going on in the world of our clinical reasoning product family, and a little bit about what we're going to be working on over the next quarter. So those are the major things we'll be talking about. And as always, we will do a Q&A session at the end. So stick around for that if you've got questions and start thinking about that. We'd love to hear them from you. So this is our 29th named release since we started doing this. I cannot believe we've hit 29. I feel like I say that every time, but it blows me away that we've been doing these quarterly releases for long enough that we've almost hit 30. Perhaps we'll have a cake next time. We will see. Copernicus. We have been on a space theme this year, if you haven't noticed, which has been kind of fun. A, B, C. A, I believe, was Aurora. Is that right? B, oh no, B was Borealis. I am absolutely blanking on what A is. There we go. I should have done my research before starting that sentence, and now I'm embarrassed. But oh well. Copernicus, of course, is the famous guy who brought us the heliocentric model of the solar system. He's the guy that finally convinced the world that we are not the center of our solar system. The sun is. I think that's fascinating. So there we go. Apollo. Someone is saying Apollo. That's great. Thank you. As always, we have got a release playlist. This is a playlist of songs curated by the people who brought you this release. It's actually kind of a short playlist. I have to admit, I forgot to submit a song for it. I think we need to extend perhaps cast a wider net. But there's some good tunes on here anyway. I gave it a listen yesterday, and there's some fun songs. A couple good blast from the past. Couple of great songs I had never even heard of. So lots of good songs on this. I will put this link up again at the end of the webinar. So don't worry if you can't catch it now. But with that said, let's move on to what's new in this release. So we've got a bunch of things that we'll talk about. I'll start out with our FHIR Gateway module. The Gateway has been perennially favorite. It is getting I'd say more and more popular these days. Lots of people are building big distributed architectures, and that kind of thing often requires the gateway to do things like aggregate data from multiple FHIR servers. We have introduced the ability for the gateway to do sorts across multiple aggregated target servers. That may sound like a small deal. To certain people, it's quite a big deal, actually. The idea being that if we get a collection of search results that are coming in from two different servers, the gateway will now appropriately sort those, and that includes sort of, sorting the results interleaved between each other, making sure that we're paging the results appropriately and respecting the page sizes requested by the client. There's a fair bit of work that goes into that. It's worth pointing out this only supports standard FHIR search parameters today. We do not have the ability in the gateway to do sorting based on custom search parameters. That's a thing hopefully we will add in the future. We've also added support for a number of, I'll call them meta search parameters. I'm sure these things have a better name, but I can't remember what it is. Either way, those are the search parameters that are built into the FHIR specification and start with an underscore, things like content, filter, language, etc. We've now got support for all of those to be searched through the gateway as well. And finally, a fairly significant bug was squashed involving target server timeouts not being respected. So those are the three major enhancements to the gateway that have happened over the last while. The security stack in Smile has seen some interesting improvements. First and foremost, a new script extension point has been added that allows you to bind scopes, whether those are default smart scopes or custom scopes you defined yourself, to additional permissions that are granted to the access token. This is important just because the smart spec is incredibly powerful. It's a really neat specification, but it really only deals with reading and writing data. So once you've enabled smart support in your server, of course, the approved scopes will whittle down your permissions so that the client only has access to the things that the smart scopes actually authorize, whether that's reading specific resources, writing specific resources, that kind of thing. That gets tricky when you want to use smart to enable support for other features in Smile, whether that's That's managing MDM, perhaps managing links in MDM, starting or stopping modules, I don't know, managing subscriptions. There's all kinds of things which are just not contemplated by the Smart spec. It's now possible to bind those additional permissions to existing Smart scopes or to custom ones as well. A second customization point has been added, a script point has been added that allows you to enhance tokens that are generated using the client credentials flow using JWT credentials, which is otherwise known as the Smart Backend Services Authorization. That spec has been supported for a good while now, but a thing that we did not have the ability to do was to introspect the token, look for additional custom claims, and then add additional Smile permissions based on those claims. So that's now additionally possible. Certainly useful. We're seeing increasing use of the Smart Backend Services spec these days. It's getting fairly broad adoption, so being able to sort of customize the auth flow through that has proved fairly popular. The world of search, and this applies both to Smile as well as to HAPI, has seen some interesting improvements. Two significant ones I'll talk about. First, the underscore text and underscore content search parameters. These search parameters, not everybody even knows they exist. They're, I'd say, fairly seldom used, but people who do know about them love them often. I often like to describe them as being a search parameter or a search engine for your FHIR repository. It lets you look for search phrases and keywords across your entire sort of corpus of FHIR data within the repository. Today, it works a little bit, like a search engine does, in that you can type a few words and it'll look for any documents that contain those words, regardless of what order they appear in. We've added support for the :contains modifier, which effectively allows you to do a substring search across the entire text of the resource, looking for an exact phrase. So this would allow you, for example, as I'm showing here, to look for the phrase "schedule an appointment" and find any FHIR resources that contain that exact phrase, as opposed to just containing those three words anywhere within them. Another thing we've done that is a performance enhancement is anyone who is performing combo search parameter searches. And if you've never worked with HAPI and Smile's combo search parameters, these allow you to index combinations of search parameters. A simple example might be name and birth date, but any combination that you frequently use together, you can create custom indexes that support those combinations. Today, they sometimes get used, or in previous releases, they sometimes get used as a part of searching. They can also be used to enforce uniqueness across combinations of search parameters, which is often a useful thing. We have really beefed up our ability to use those as a part of searching, which is really helpful. Ultimately, if you frequently perform searches that contain a combination of searches, even if you're doing, complicated and or joins these days, we will now attempt to use the combo search parameter tables, which means fewer joins, fewer work for the database, better use of indexes, and ultimately much faster searches for those combinations of search parameters. So this is, we've seen some really significant improvements of performance in some scenarios with testing of this feature. Also worth mentioning, we've added sort of a new hash-based index for our non-unique combo search parameters. We're now using that to search instead of using the raw text, which makes those searches even faster. We've also added a similar hash to the unique combo search parameters. This is a fairly technical topic, so I'm not going to spend too much more time talking about this, but if people have questions about how this works, of course, the HAPI FHIR Google group would be a great place to ask them. One other thing worth mentioning in the world of search, we've added a new mode called Index Storage Optimized Mode. And what this does is it reduces a bunch of non-critical sort of debug information from the index storage tables. That debug information is things like the name of the search parameter, the name of the resource type. All of that is encoded into a hash, which is actually the thing we use to search. So you don't technically need that data in those rows. That data is useful if you're trying to troubleshoot, so we leave it there by default. But as increasingly we're seeing people with just monstrous, database sizes who are looking to reduce anything they possibly can in order to avoid size limitations in their databases, this optimized mode might be useful for those people, as it does reduce the overall size of the database. We've made a couple of improvements to Megascale. We do, of course, continue to work on Megascale and roll out improvements to this as people try and use Smile on just massive distributed clusters of databases. We now have a special mode, special option for the $reindex operation. Effectively, it's a special partition name that allows you to issue a reindex that will reindex every one of your megascale databases, i.e. all of your partitions and shards, which is quite a useful thing. We've also enabled the meta add and meta delete operations for both of, or basically for any megascale deployments. So those are the two new features there. A couple of interesting miscellaneous features I'll talk about quickly. We now support two-factor authentication, i.e. the TOTP protocol for the web admin console. Previously, that was supported for a number of other modules, most importantly the smart authorization modules, but that's now supported for the web admin as well. For people who are using our JavaScript APIs to work with HL7 v2 messages, we've added a for each iterator, which makes it a whole lot easier to walk through segment repetitions. It's a fairly trivial change in the grand scheme of things, but I've used it personally. It's quite a great quality of life improvement if you're working with v2 messaging. And importantly, on MS SQL, i.e. the SQL Server database, we have made a schema change that now allows you to have FHIR resources that have identical resource IDs, but with different casing. And you can see the example I've given of capital A1 versus lowercase a1. That is a requirement per the FHIR spec. FHIR does say that resource IDs are case sensitive, and they already worked that way across other databases than SQL Server. But the default collation that we used on that column in SQL Server meant that those indexes ended up, or those resource IDs ended up being case sensitive, and that caused or case insensitive, which caused a few strange issues for customers. So that has been fixed. Incidentally, that applies to HAPI FHIR as well. That's not a Smile specific change, that last one. A couple of interesting HAPI FHIR changes that have been added over the course of this release. The underscore summary, I guess, search parameter, that's perhaps, or request parameter anyway, that's probably the right term for that, which allows you to request resources in summary mode. In other words, only return the summary attributes of a resource, which is a built-in set of attributes that every resource in the FHIR spec has, can now be customized. So you can now programmatically tell HAPI FHIR, this is the list of elements I want to include in the summary encoding. Which can be useful. The performance for reindexing has been greatly improved. We spent a bunch of time optimizing how reindex works in cases where combo search parameters are in use. You might sense a theme here. We've done a bunch of work on combo search parameters, and that's because we've had a number of users start to roll combo search parameters out. They really are a great performance enhancer and a great quality of life sort of feature. So we've done a bunch of work on those, and one of the things we identified is that reindexing was a little bit slow when you had combo search parameters enabled, so that's been fixed. One final thing, the FHIR core library, which is the library that is also a part of HAPI FHIR, but is sort of coded as a separate GitHub repository. That repository contains, most importantly, the FHIR validator code base, but it's also got the FHIR path evaluator, the converter library, a number of other useful tools. We have updated that to the very latest version. Generally speaking, HAPI FHIR releases will always update to the latest release, but we have been lagging over the last 6 months, not because we didn't want to stay up to date, but there were a number of API, sort of structural API changes that happened in the core library that took us a while to wrap our heads around and sort of reconcile between the two code bases. So we have finally finished that. If you've been waiting for fixes in the validator, for example, and I know there's a number of people in that camp, if you've been waiting for validator fixes over the last few months, your wait is finally over. We are back up to the very latest validator in HAPI FHIR, which is great for anyone doing validation. This is kind of an interesting pair of slides I'm going to show you. Normally, we have one or two callouts to HAPI FHIR community contributors. This time, we've got 2 slides worth, which is really exciting. We've got a number of enhancements that have come in from the HAPI FHIR community. And as I always say at the end of the webinar, we are a welcoming and open community. We love outside contributions where we do our best to review them, give good feedback, help people get their code in. A whole bunch of great things have happened. The in-memory search evaluator had a really interesting optimization that was suggested by Amit. Thank you very much, Amit, for that. I did some performance testing, and the in-memory search evaluator now operates actually a fair bit faster in a number of cases. In-memory searching is used in a few places, but most importantly for subscription processing. So this really means that subscriptions are a whole lot faster to execute on heavily loaded systems. Thank you to Jens, who made some enhancements to the subscription subsystem. So we can now use FHIR path criteria, including the current and previous variables, as a part of the execution criteria or the subscription triggering criteria. That's a thing that was made available in FHIR R5 and is also available in the R4 backport extension. So that's now possible. Jens also pointed out that we were using the accept charset header, which was a recommended header 10 years ago when we started the HAPI FHIR library, but has now been deprecated and is no longer recommended for use by the IETF. So Jens has kindly removed our use of that header, which is great. Thank you to guys who added support for the max parameter on the last n operation. Last n, if you're not familiar with it, really interesting operation, allows you to build face sheets and other things where you're looking for the most recent observations over a collection of different codes. Kind of a really interesting thing. It previously had support for the max parameter, but it didn't work properly. So guys noticed that and fixed it. Thank you very much for that. Thank you to Stefan, who fixed actually a fairly fundamental bug with our JSON parser. I'm surprised that this has existed for as long as it did, but there was a specific condition in the parser where if you had an extension on an element that didn't otherwise exist, in other words, perhaps you had an extension on the family name element, but you didn't actually have a family name there, occasionally that extension wouldn't get parsed properly. So Stefan fixed that, which we definitely thank him for. Thank you to Jesse, who made a CSS tweak to the OpenAPI Swagger UI pages that were blocking people from clicking on the authorization button if they were trying to add authorization capabilities to their Swagger UI. A really interesting performance enhancement went into the MDM candidate search subsystem. Thank you, Adrian, for that. Effectively, what this means is that if there are required search parameters that are not present in the candidate request, then we won't try and evaluate them, which actually in some cases can significantly improve performance. That's a great one. Renaud contributed 3 changes, very exciting. One was a tweak to the R5 validator. Renaud noticed that if you were validating MDH documents, which are IHE mobile health documents, and this is an R5 specification, there was a missing validation support method that caused an exception to be thrown. He also made tweaks to the way that we generate capability statements in order to use the server's name as a part of the narrative in that generated capability statement. And he fixed a startup failure in the JPA starter project. So thank you, Renaud, for that. And finally, thank you to Alex, who contributed a fix to RESTful Server, the HAPI FHIR server framework. It's now possible to override the default context path detection and supply your own logic there, which is exciting. A huge thank you to everyone I've just listed. We don't normally get that many outside contributions, or perhaps we've done a better job of closing pull requests. I'm not sure which of those it is, but either way, a massive thank you to everyone who's contributed to HAPI FHIR over the last quarter. We continue to work on open telemetry. A bunch of new stuff has happened there. We've added new metrics for resource creation and updating. We've added metrics for HL7 message processing. I guess that first one is a HAPI FHIR thing. The second one is a Smile CDR specific thing, as are the next couple. We have added support. We've basically added trace IDs and span IDs to the system logs we generate, which make it much easier to correlate between what you've got in your open telemetry monitoring tools and what you see in your system logs. Importantly, we have just deprecated support for Elastic APM. We don't have a timeline for removing it. So if you're using Elastic APM, we would love to hear from you so that we can, we can figure out whether there's a timeline we can pick or whether we need to keep Elastic APM around for longer. But either way, we have seen a pretty dramatic shift towards open telemetry, which is a great thing. We're a big fan of open standards here, and the open telemetry spec is a great example of an open spec that we want to support. People are moving to open telemetry, and I think in a lot of ways that replaces our previous use of Elastic APM. So we have now deprecated that. Finally, we've added new open telemetry spans, which can be used for tracing batch jobs, which of course happen in the background. In the world of our CDA module, so we launched our CDA Exchange Plus module in the last quarter. we are now able to successfully import CCDA discharge summary documents. And what that means is we will take a CCDA discharge summary, we will import all of its data into discrete FHIR resources, and they can be optionally imported into your FHIR repository if you'd like. Great stuff there. We've also added a bunch of bindings that allow you to take advantage of the CDA translation from CAML pipelines within Smile, which is exciting. And a reminder, this is now a licensed module, so if you want to take advantage of CDA Exchange, give us a shout. We would love to talk to you about that. In the world of MDM, we've added a number of new features. Most importantly, some workflow management. So the MDM UI will now check if users have performed actions and ensuring that records are reviewed and updated successfully. Obviously, very useful stuff. We've added features for data stewardship, including the ability to view a history of MDM links for every golden record. There's a bunch of useful information that comes with that. We've added a whole bunch of new data governance tools as well, so tooltips, guidance, and various things to the UIs that are used to help you build your rules. So that ultimately can be useful. And finally, we've translated the MDM UI. So if you need bilingual support, English and French, which is at least for people in Canada, often a very useful thing. We've now got a French translation for all of that. And it occurs to me I skipped one as well. We now in the side-by-side comparison view of MDM UI, where administrators are reviewing matches, you now see the MDM score as a part of that side-by-side view. So that's been added. Two more things I will say before I hand the reins over to Bryn to talk about our clinical reasoning suite. One is that we have just a massive list of bug fixes that went into this release. As we were trying to distill this down into these slides, we had to skip a lot of them. So I will encourage you to go through the HAPI FHIR and Smile CDR product change logs. There is a monstrous list for both of those products. Of course, all of the HAPI FHIR ones apply to Smile as well, but there are a ton of changes in each of those. So I would encourage you to have a look at those change logs. And finally, I have to say a huge congratulations to the team. This is breaking news. I just added this slide this morning. The team, as of yesterday, have successfully completed their second complete recertification audit for ISO 13485, and that, of course, is the ISO standard for quality management system, a QMS for the development of medical software. So we have now completed our second full recertification audit on that. Congratulations to the team. Anyone who's ever been through an ISO 13485 audit knows what an intense amount of work it is. I mean, A, to build your processes and follow them, but B, to get through the audits. So congratulations to everyone who has done that. With that, I would like to hand the reins over to Bryn Rhodes, who is our Director of Standards Strategy, and obviously a big champion of the world of clinical reasoning, to talk us through what is new in that world.
Thank you, James. So we've got a host of features and bug fixes throughout the digital quality measurement platform. So first up is the ability to store CMS QPP submission and response. So as part of that CMS submission, you're required to save the records validating the reporting and the activities performed. So the solution creates and stores a submission and the response that you receive. We've also, on the UI for all of that capability, we've made some significant improvements to the state persistence in the application. So we can maintain continuity and reduce the need to re-enter data as you're going through those submission processes. It retains state between when the user is navigating from one tab to the other or one workspace to another within that DQN application. And all the populated parameters in the report options, selected measures, and measure reports will retain that data until the user changes. So much improved quality of life on actually getting through those submission forms. We have more flexible quality measure submission. So you can submit anywhere from 1 to 6 at this point. Flexibility ensures customers can receive availability or benefits for the measures they can submit, even if it's fewer than 6. We now support all patient population selection for evaluation and submission. So you want to just run across all patients in the system and submit those evaluations. It also includes a comprehensive view of system-wide metrics, facilitating more informed decision-making. We've also enhanced the security with hidden registry tokens for registry method submission. So you can use that when testing measures and also to securely store your registry token that remains hidden and secure, so you can still do the submission without exposing that token. Next slide. So there's a new evaluate measures operation that supports low latency and batch evaluation. So this includes improved reuse of data. So for one call evaluating multiple measures, we're able to reuse the data across those evaluations. And when you're running quality reporting for a set of measures, there's also low latency multi-threading capability. So there's additional performance improvements in there for parallel processing. We've also improved the distributed measure evaluation support in that distributed evaluate measure operation. It now allows for the subject list report type. And so you can actually run this on much larger populations and get using a list resource and paging through the list paging capability. So that's a critical component for provenance audit processes and downstream operations like the population level care gaps. Next slide. We've also got a host of bug fixes in there. One was on measure score. If the group ID was missing on a single rate measure, then the aggregates were not calculated correctly. So that fix allows for both options on a single measure as well as multi-rate measure. And it also included a fix to the QPP specification reference to source data. And that will be required in the August 2024 testing. So it also addressed several performance issues to make that categorization easier. There's a care gaps concurrent modification exception. In some cases, when you were doing care gaps processing, a concurrent modification exception would be thrown, and that has now been fixed. And the improvement notation there was an issue with improvement notation. If that was missing, it would throw an exception. We correctly handle that case now. Improved QPP build support. We've also expanded support for the QPP programs for PCF and MVP in that QPP build operation. Simplified the program library structure to reduce maintenance burden between multiple programs and submissions across those. And we removed restrictions on the quantity of reports for that quality program library. We also added parameters for submission method, so you can do dynamic runtime override to allow for DQMUI pre-score. So you can see that before submission, and a new program name parameter to the operation that allows you to filter the measures you want to run by that program operation. So that is the set of fixes and enhancements for the clinical reasoning side.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bryn. So a couple of things worth talking about. We have a complimentary Gartner report that we will make available. That's, we're obviously very proud to have been named in their report, How Clinical Data Integration Improves U.S. Healthcare Payer Interoperability. Feel free to scan that QR code if you would like a copy of that. I'm sure we'll make the link available as well on the link to this video. So there we go. A couple of things that, I do not know why that's black like that. That's looking a little strange, assuming that's not just my screen that's showing that way. We will be at the following events. We will be at the eSolutions Exchange event, which is happening at the end of August, I guess in the next week. We will, of course, be at the HL7 FHIR Connect-a-thon that's happening in Phoenix next month. I'm certain Bryn and I will be there, and I think there will probably be a few other smilers there as well. We'll also be at the NCQA Health Innovation Summit at the end of October. So we would love to chat with you at any of these events. So come say hello if you'll be at any of these events. And there we go. This is the end. Here are the links as promised to the slide to the release playlist, as well as to a couple of other helpful links. I would now like to welcome the illustrious Megan Pete to join us for Q&A. Welcome, Megan.
Hello, thank you for having me. Great presentation as always. I found all those extra community contribution slides just really exciting. Like I always find them interesting, but the fact that we had so many, I just think that's so neat. We don't have any questions currently in the chat, but for anybody who is watching live, this is your opportunity. If you have any questions or clarifications, both on this topic or something related to Smile or our clinical reasoning suite, please feel free to chime in. I will read them out loud for you. I'll get them in. In the meantime, my go-to question, always looking for the future, is there anything, this is for both of you, is there anything interesting you guys are working on that we'll see in the next quarter?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess there's two things that I will talk about. One that I'm going to be a little sketchy on, but there we go. We are beginning a process a little bit to contemplate the name of our platform. So I will say at this point, our product is still called Smile CDR. I've been talking about Smile CDR the entire way through, but I mean, a thing you will definitely notice is increasingly, while we still do talk about lots of features that are going into the actual data repository part of the product, there is a ton of other things. I mean, ultimately, we are not just a data repository. We are a health data platform. There's way more to the platform than just its ability to store data. So I think we've kind of outgrown the original name of the product. So we're thinking actively about that. I'm not going to give anything away yet, but I think hopefully by the time we all meet in November, we'll be talking about a new name for that platform. So I think that's kind of exciting. One other thing that's, I guess, a little bit more technical and will affect both HAPI and Smile users. We are certainly at the beginning phase of thinking about what to do in terms of supporting new database platforms that are coming out from both Azure and or from both Microsoft and Amazon related to scalable database technologies. Azure have recently released their Cosmos, their new Cosmos for Postgres database, which allows for effectively unlimited scaling on a Postgres database. AWS have been working on their Limitless Aurora for Postgres. I really hope I'm getting those names right. Either way, I'm pretty close, I'm pretty sure. These are both, certainly they're not identical technologies. They've got some interesting implementation differences and some interesting philosophy differences, but ultimately they are both technologies that allow you to create databases with much higher scalability. I see these as potentially an interesting alternative to our megascale technology, and it actually in some ways would come with some advantages over using megascale. Obviously, frankly, some drawbacks as well, but I think that's all to be explored. The big trade-off is there are schema changes required. Both of these technologies do impose some specifics on the way that your schema needs to be designed, and that means code changes for us. So while I'm not committing yet that we're going to support these technologies, I will say we're very actively working on figuring out how we can add support, like how we would make the requisite schema changes. The big challenge there, of course, is how do we make schema changes without alienating existing users? We certainly don't want to force anyone who's got an existing deployment to take their system down for weeks while we make schema changes. Whatever we do has to be something that can be done online with the database. So that obviously imposes a significant constraint on the way that we can evolve the product, and we're actively figuring out how we can do that. So, I mean, more to come on both of those topics, but those are two things I'm personally quite excited about the next while. I don't know, Bryn, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. First thing is, I want a little go back on that event slide. I want to point out that we will be in Atlanta, not Phoenix.
My goodness.
I don't know how I missed that. I reviewed these slides like 6 times, and until you said it out loud, I was like, oh no, we are not going there. We're not having our own little connectathon in Phoenix. We will be in Atlanta. Some of the things that I'm excited about are we're continuing to move forward on kind of vNext of a lot of the specifications that are supporting the clinical reasoning capabilities. Most notably CQL. We're looking forward to a vNext ballot in CQL that will come with a lot of new features that have been requested. We're also in the final stages of wrapping up kind of the next version of the clinical guidelines implementation guide as well, which supports a lot of the clinical reasoning capability. So really looking forward to those. And this, I see a question. I don't want to take the moderator thunder there, but that was one of the things that I was going to talk about. We are looking at different ways to incorporate AI capabilities, especially in terms of the authoring side of clinical reasoning content. So looking at things like how kind of AI co-pilot type features can be incorporated. So those are things that we are very excited about.
I'm going to pass that question. You snuck ahead of me there, Brent. I did see it, I promise. And pass that off to you, James, as well. And also just read it out loud for the context of anyone who's watching the VODs and can't necessarily see the question or is just listening in, which is Smile working on anything that some of the new AI capabilities have been coming out? So Bryn's already said what's going on the clinical reasoning side, but is there anything happening on the other sides?
You know, I mean, I don't know that I've got a lot to add to that. I think the main and most exciting thing that we're working on in that space absolutely is in the area of sort of, you know, clinical knowledge authoring effectively. I think there's just, it's such a ripe field for the use of AI technologies. I think it's really interesting, and that team are doing some really cool stuff. We do have a number of other irons in the fire going there, but I don't know truthfully that we're ready to do any announcements there. So I think ultimately I'm going to be a little bit evasive on my answer there. There's a bunch of stuff I'm excited about, just not stuff that I think we're quite ready to talk about yet.
Yeah, definitely a lot of exploring, and when we know where we're going, we'll have more exciting announcements for that one. We don't have anything else in the chat. I just want to sneak in because we asked this last time about connectathons and some of the stuff that we've done that was interesting. Is there anything to look forward to our connectathon that's not our secret connectathon in Phoenix?
That's a fun one. Bryn, why don't you start?
Yeah, we are continuing to make significant progress on the use of terminology, especially federated terminology servers. We're pushing on that very hard. It's a really thorny problem when you have multiple knowledge artifacts that are all drawing from the same set of terminology. And how do you make sure that the artifacts that you're running in an implementation are using the same terminologies that they were authored with? Especially when you have multiple versions of those artifacts and you potentially need to run those on different sets of data in the same space. And so we're pushing really hard on that. We have a vast and growing set of test cases that we use to validate terminology servers, and we invite anyone to join there. That's one kind of area. Another area is just there's a huge body of quality measures that we're testing regularly in the Connectathon. We're up to like 60 some odd quality measures in FHIR and QI Core, with some associated 3,000 test cases that we run through and try to demonstrate parity across engines and across environments. So we invite anyone interested in that space, especially if you're interested in running those measures across your data. I would love to see participants there. And then lots of movement and kind of cutting edge from the standards perspective, usage of clinical guidelines and the incorporation of questionnaires. So how do you really get down to involving the provider in answering questions that are needed to inform the recommendations that we're returning? So there's lots of work going on there, and we'll be testing those types of things, plus breakouts along those lines. So that's what's coming up for the clinical reasoning track, at least.
There we go. I mean, to me personally, I'll continue to be involved in the IPS track. I would say my personal aim, for what it's worth, is to try and move forward on an idea we've had for a long time to revisit the way we do narrative generation and move to potentially a more friendly syntax than our existing time leaf syntax. More to come there, but we've got a bunch of ideas on how we could do something really interesting in the world of generating narratives for resources, which has pretty broad implications to the world of international patient summary, but certainly extends well beyond it as well. One other thing I'll mention, I'm certain we're going to have a bunch of people participating in Da Vinci tracks as well. We obviously have a large team working on things like the electronic prior authorization specs and our tooling to support that initiative. I'm sure we'll be there testing that as well. So there's probably the three things that Smile will be most involved with at this Connectathon.
All right, thank you so much. So don't go to Phoenix, go to, sorry, where is it again?
Atlanta.
So come meet us in Atlanta to try out some of these new things, or at least evolving things. That's all we have for questions today. It's been a quieter group. That's okay. Maybe, next quarter we'll get some more. Maybe we won't. We'll see. But thank you guys so much for your presentation. Obviously, thank you to the work. I once again want to say thank you to all the community contributors. That's just so neat. I hope that trend continues. But thanks everyone for coming and attending and watching as well. I hope everyone has a great day, and I look forward to the next release.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.